Everybody calm down. It's here. The COVID release of the Twitter files is here. There is one so far. There's going to be many more to come, and I know we all have been waiting for this. So, this first one is released by David Zweig. I'll list his name in the description below, and I'm just going to get right into it so we don't have to wait any longer. The Twitter files. How Twitter rigged the COVID debate. 1. By censoring info that was true but convenient to U.S. government policy. 2. By discrediting doctors and other experts who disagreed. And 3. By suppressing ordinary users, including some sharing the own CDC's data. So far, the Twitter files have focused on evidence of Twitter's secret blacklists, how the company functions as a kind of subsidiary of the FBI, and how execs rewrote the platform's rules to accommodate their own political desires. What we have yet to cover is COVID. This reporting, for the free press, is one piece of that important story. The United States government pressured Twitter and other social media platforms to elevate certain content and suppress other content about COVID-19. Internal files at Twitter that I viewed while on assignment for the free press showed that both the Trump and Biden administrations directly pressed Twitter executives to moderate the platform's pandemic content according to their wishes. Again, I say, both the Trump and Biden administrations directly pressed Twitter executives to moderate the platform's pandemic content according to their wishes. At the onset of the pandemic, according to meeting notes, the Trump admin was especially concerned about panic buying. They came looking for help from the tech companies to combat misinformation about, quote, runs on grocery stores. But there were runs on grocery stores. It wasn't just Twitter. The meetings with the Trump White House were also attended by Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and others. When the Biden admin took over, one of their first meeting requests with Twitter executives was on COVID. The focus was on, quote, anti-vaxxer accounts, especially Alex Berenson. In the summer of 2021, President Biden said social media companies were, quote, killing people for allowing vaccine misinformation. Berenson was suspended hours after Biden's comments and kicked off the platform the following month. Berenson sued and then settled with Twitter. In the legal process, Twitter was compelled to release certain internal communications which showed direct White House pressure on the company to take action on Berenson. A December 2022 summary of meetings with the White House by Lauren Culbertson, Twitter's head of U.S. public policy, adds new evidence of the White House's pressure campaign and cements that it repeatedly attempted to directly influence the platform. Culbertson wrote that Biden's team was, quote, very angry that Twitter had not been more aggressive in deplatforming multiple accounts. They wanted Twitter to do more. Twitter executives did not fully capitulate to the Biden team's wishes. An extensive review of internal communications at the company revealed employees often debating moderation cases in great detail, and with more care than was shown by the government towards free speech. But despite those internal debates, Twitter did suppress views, many from doctors and scientific experts, that conflicted with the official positions of the White House. As a result, legitimate findings and questions that would have expanded the public debate went missing. There were 3 serious problems with Twitter's process. First, much of the content moderation was conducted by bots, trained on machine learning and AI, impressive in their engineering, yet too crude for such nuanced work. Second, contractors in places like the Philippines also moderated content. They were given decision trees to aid in the process, but tasking non-experts to adjudicate tweets on complex topics like myocarditis and mask efficacy data was destined for a significant error rate. Third, most importantly, the buck stopped with the higher-level employees at Twitter who chose the inputs for the bots and decision trees and subjectively decided escalated cases and suspensions. As it is with all people and institutions, there was individual and collective bias. With COVID, this bias bent heavily towards establishment dogmas. Inevitably, dissident yet legitimate content was labeled as misinformation, and the accounts of doctors and others were suspended both for tweeting opinions and demonstrably true information. Exhibit A, Dr. Martin Kulldorff, an epidemiologist at Harvard Medical School, tweeted views at odds with the U.S. public health authorities and the American left, the political affiliation of nearly the entire staff at Twitter. Martin Kulldorff tweeted, "Thinking that everyone must be vaccinated is as scientifically flawed as thinking that nobody should. COVID vaccines are important for older high-risk people and their caretakers. Those with prior natural infection do not need it, nor children." Internal emails show an intent to action by a moderator saying Kulldorff's tweet violated the company's COVID-19 misinformation policy and claimed he shared, quote, false information. But Kulldorff's statement was an expert's opinion, one which also happened to be in line with vaccine policies in numerous other countries. Yet it was deemed, quote, false information by Twitter moderators merely because it differed from the CDC guidelines. After Twitter took action, Kulldorff's tweet was slapped with a misleading label, and all replies and likes were shut off, throttling the tweet's ability to be seen and shared by many people, the ostensible core function of the platform. In my review of internal files, I found countless instances of tweets labeled as misleading or taken down entirely, sometimes triggering account suspensions, simply because they veered from CDC guidance or differed from establishment views. A tweet by Kelly KGA, a self-proclaimed public health fact-checker with 18,000 followers, was flagged as misleading and replies and likes disabled, even though it displayed the CDC's own data. Kelly wrote, "What an excellent example of cherry picking. If you narrow it down to only the specific months you specify, which include the largest COVID wave seen across the world, and you ignore all non-disease deaths, and you ignore cancer, heart disease, SIDS, then COVID is leading in deaths." Internal records show that a bot had flagged the tweet and that it received many, quote, tattles. Tattles are what the system amusingly called reports from users. That triggered a manual review by a human who, despite the tweet showing actual CDC data, nevertheless labeled it misleading. Tellingly, the tweet by Kelly that was labeled misleading was a reply to a tweet that contained actual misinformation. COVID has never been the leading cause of death from disease in children. Yet that tweet remains on the platform and without a misleading label. Whether by humans or algorithms, content that was contrarian but true was still subject to getting flagged or suppressed. This tweet was labeled, quote, misleading, even though the owner of this account, a physician, was referring to the results of a published study. He wrote, "Below the first study I have seen showing that mRNA vaccines in young people aged 16 to 39 are associated with cardiac arrests, not just myocarditis." Andrew Bostom, a Rhode Island physician, was permanently suspended from Twitter after receiving multiple strikes for misinformation. One of his strikes was for a tweet referring to the results from a peer-reviewed study on mRNA vaccines. A review of Twitter log files revealed that an internal audit conducted after Bostom's attorney contacted Twitter found that only one of Bostom's 5 violations were valid. The one Bostom tweet found to still be in violation cited data that was legitimate but inconvenient to the public health establishment's narrative about the risks of flu versus COVID in children. The tweet by Bostom read, U.S. and local Rhode Island data. Influenza is more lethal than COVID-19 in children, while COVID-19 vaccination causes serious morbidity than influenza vaccination in children. That this tweet was not only flagged by a bot, but its violation manually affirmed by a staff member is telling of both the algorithmic and human bias at play. Bostom's account was suspended for months and was finally restored on Christmas Day. Another example of human bias run amok was the reaction to this tweet by Trump. Many Trump tweets led to extensive internal debates, and this one was no different. Trump tweeted, I will be leaving the Great Walter Reed Medical Center today at 6:30 p.m. Feeling really good. Don't be afraid of COVID. Don't let it dominate your life. We have developed, under the Trump administration, some really great drugs and knowledge. I feel better than I did 20 years ago. In a surreal exchange, Jim Baker, at the time Twitter's deputy general counsel, asks why telling people to not be afraid wasn't a violation of Twitter's COVID-19 misinformation policy. Yoel Roth, Twitter's former head of trust and safety, had to explain that optimism wasn't misinformation. Remember Kelly with the CDC data tweet? Twitter's response to her is clarifying. We will prioritize review and labeling of content that could lead to increased exposure or transmission. Twitter made a decision via the political leanings of senior staff and government pressure that the public health authorities' approach to the pandemic is prioritizing mitigation over other concerns, was the, quote, the science. Information that challenged that view, such as showing harms of vaccines, or that could be perceived as downplaying the risks of COVID, especially to children, was subject to moderation and even suppression, no matter whether such views were correct or adopted abroad. What might this pandemic and its aftermath have looked like if there had been a more open debate on Twitter and other social media platforms, not to mention the mainstream press, about the origins of COVID, about lockdowns, about the true risks of COVID in kids, and much more? Thanks to Schellenberger MD, L. Woodhouse, L.H. Fang, and the team at the Free Press for their help reporting this story. And he says that an expanded version of this thread is now available at the Free Press. So there we have it, folks. And I'll just say again, in summary, that David listed in the beginning of the first release here, is that they censored info that was true but inconvenient to U.S. government policy. They discredited doctors and other experts who disagreed. They suppressed ordinary users and even some sharing the own CDC's data. So I just have a few thoughts on this. First thing, do you really want to live in a world where speaking anything outside of the approved opinion is silenced? Furthermore, your character is then attacked and discredited. I know this is a really hot button topic and there's a lot of people that disagree with either side, but you have to pay attention to the principle, not the person talking. And too many people get wrapped up in politics and Trump versus Biden and yada yada. But I think it's important that we don't focus on the person spreading the message. We focus on the actual message and the data and the facts. And it's important that we are allowed to have that debate. When it comes to any health-related discoveries, the magic of successful research starts with curiosity and discovery. And when you silence the voices of anyone that doesn't 100% agree with your narrative, well, that just goes to show you those people who are silencing others, they don't really care about the health of the public or the truth. What those silencers care about is politics and the money they make from selling pharmaceuticals and treatments that they support. I personally believe, and I mean, especially living in America, we need to be able to have these discussions. You know, we need to be able to say, I disagree with you, but I'd like to hear what kind of information you have, just in case we can find something useful out of it, especially when it comes to health. So, and for anyone out there that believes in censorship of a healthy debate on such important topics, you have to remember you're not only hurting other people, you're only hurting yourself in the end, because everyone at some point is going to be a patient. And we need to do everything we can to explore and discuss and research every option for the good and the health of humanity. Anyhow, that's my 2 cents. I'd love to hear your 2 cents below. And to help get this message out there, please do me a favor and like and subscribe. I'm really thankful for all of you for tuning in, and I will see you in the next installment of the Twitter files, the COVID files. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.